the PowerPoint presentation as well as the audio from the webinar will be posted under the grant section of the FNS public website. As we mentioned before, all phone lines have been muted and participants are in listen-only mode for the webinar portion. We welcome you to use the chat feature in WebEx to ask your questions throughout the webinar, and we will respond to as many as we can at the end after we go through the slides. And lastly, we've included a lot of information in this webinar, but all of this information is also included in the RFA, and we will provide the slides in an email after the webinar. So both the recording and the slide deck will be available on the FNS website, so you should have access to all this information. So hopefully you don't have to catch everything this first time. If you have any questions, you can go, always refer back to the slides. So I'm going to get us started now and head on to the next slide. Okay. So I'm just going to give us a little background on what we're going to talk about today. We will discuss basic information about the purpose of this grant and who can apply for funding, funding priorities for this year's grant competition, review criteria that will be used by evaluators to assess the application, and application submission procedures, so some details on the application process, and then we will answer your questions at the end. The purpose of this grant competition is to develop and implement projects that focus on improving the quality and efficiency of SNAP operations and processes. Quickly, I'm going to go over the eligible entities for you all. We have state agencies that administer SNAP, so that's the 50 states along with DC, Guam, and the Virgin Islands, state or local governments, agencies that provide health or welfare services, public health or educational entities, and private nonprofit entities, which includes community-based or faith-based organizations, food banks, or other emergency feeding organizations. As you can see, there's a broad swath of entities which may apply for a PTIG award. I did want to flag that new this year, entities that received a PTIG award in FY18, so last fiscal year, will not be eligible to apply this year. This only applies to the lead entity on the award, so not to partner organizations or government agencies. Okay.
Can everyone hear us all on the line? If you can't hear us, please just alert us through the chat box or the Q&A box. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to move on to just some general overview of the award. And some of this information you probably know, but the PTIGs are subject to availability of funds. Up to $5 million will be available for this year's grant competition. Grants are awarded through a competitive process. In other words, submitting a proposal does not guarantee funding. There is no cost sharing or cost matching required for these awards. The funding amount per award is dependent on the number of awards granted. FNS anticipates that we will award between 6 and 11 grants in fiscal year 2019. And the anticipated funding level per award ranges anywhere from $20,000 to $2 million. So in the past, we have awarded a grantee less funds than requested in their proposal. Sometimes this occurs because something a grantee requested funds for wasn't allowable, or the goals of the project could be achieved with less funds. For example, when travel costs for contractors seem excessive. The project period for this award is 3 years. All PTIG funds must be obligated, and all activities under the grant must be completed by September 30th, 2022. If the activities funded under this grant are part of a larger eligibility system project with total projected cost exceeding $6 million, an advanced planning document must be submitted and approved prior to the expenditure of these funds. Guidance on the APD process can be found on the FNS website, and we can provide that link to you all in our follow-up email. And I believe it's also listed in the RFA. To read brief summary information about previous projects funded under the PTIGs, you can visit the FY19 PTIG page on the FNS website. We will, at the end of this presentation, we're going to walk through how to find the PTIG website on our site. So you should hopefully be able to easily access that. And if you scroll to the bottom of the page, there's a list of the FY18, FY17, all previous grantees that could help you see what people have done in the past. So I want to bring your attention to some funding restrictions that exist for all grantees. The first is that pre-award costs will not be awarded. That is, that any costs incurred prior to the grant project period begins is not something that can be used. Funds are intended for new projects only. Funds cannot be used for ongoing costs of existing projects. Projects that are predicated on waiving SNAP regulations are not allowable, and the funds can only be used for SNAP's share of project costs. So that's if a project includes programs other than SNAP, the budget must show how the costs are allocated among the benefiting programs and demonstrate that this grant is only to fund SNAP's share of the project costs. So you want to be very clear about that. And finally, the project cannot devote more than 25% of the requested grant funds to outreach activities, such as informational materials, peer application assistance, screening and pre-qualifying applicants, or activities whose purpose is to attract or recruit SNAP applicants. This is in alignment with overall SNAP outreach guidance. Okay. Now I just want to highlight some key dates for you all. Completed grant proposals along with all the necessary forms must be completed and uploaded onto grants.gov by Monday, June 10th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. FNS will announce the recipients of this year's grants no later than September 30th, 2019. The project period of the award is 3 years, beginning September 30th, 2019 and ending September 30th, 2022. Okay, I'm going to now turn things over to Alice, who I introduced at the beginning, and she's going to talk to you all a little bit more about our funding priority areas.
Great, thanks, Libby. So now we're going to discuss this year's funding priority areas. The funding priorities for this grant competition change each year based on FNS agency priorities and SNAP program needs. This year, projects should prioritize one or more of the following: improving and or modernizing notices, improving customer service, or improving the application and interview process. Proposals must also identify how one or more SNAP certification processes will be improved as a result of the project. So, for example, proposals should explain how the project will improve application intake or application screening, the interview, notices, verifications, client reporting, recertification, complaints, or the fair hearing process, just to name some examples. Projects that target traditionally underserved populations, such as the elderly, disabled, rural communities, and veterans, are especially encouraged. So the first priority area that we're going to discuss today is improving and or modernizing notices. Proposals that target this priority area might include improvements to the clarity of language on notices that the state provides by utilizing the new FNS SNAP Notice Toolkit. The toolkit is available as an attachment on grants.gov in case you were looking for where to find it. It's attached to the posting for this grant competition. Projects could also include the implementation of electronic notices through an online account on a secure website or portal, or reminder functions such as text messages. Those are all considered in the notice category. Our next priority area is improving customer service. Proposals that target this priority will improve the client's experience and might include the modernization or improvement of call centers, client hotlines, or lobby management. It could also include the use of interactive voice response technology, or IVR, or it could include enhancing workflows for handling calls, or reducing the time from when a caller dials in to when their issue is resolved. Projects could also focus on efforts to reduce the amount of time between when a client applies and a decision is made on their case. So the third priority area is improving application and interview process. These are projects that enhance conversations between eligibility workers and clients or improve applications. So, for example, projects in this priority area could train eligibility workers to improve conversations that occur during the interview to ensure that households are screened for relevant deductions or understand the work requirement if that's applicable to them. Projects in this area could also train workers on taking steps to ensure that clients understand all of their rights and responsibilities as a SNAP household. Or another project that would fit into this priority area would include targeting towards improving applications, both online applications as well as paper-based applications, to make them easier to understand and complete. So new this year, in addition to the priority areas, we also have a potential for bonus points. So proposals that are particularly data-driven will be awarded up to 3 bonus points beyond the possible 100 bonus points during the scoring process. And projects that would be eligible for this could include incorporating user experience testing or having conducted research in advance of submission of a proposal in order to more accurately identify the quantifiable problem that the proposed solution is intended to solve. Inclusion of specific quantifiable statistics to bolster the argument that the proposed project is necessary in order to better serve SNAP clients may earn additional points. So there's a possibility for up to 3 points, and we're going to go over the points in just a second. So just to recap, all applications must support efforts by state agencies and community-based and faith-based partners to develop and implement projects that focus on improving the quality and efficiency of SNAP operations and processes. Grant proposals must be submitted to grants.gov by Monday, June 10th by 11:59 p.m. Eastern. We have no control over changing that deadline, so please do not miss it. The RFA does include a detailed checklist that will help applicants ensure their proposals meet all necessary requirements. And we included this on page Roman numeral 3 of the RFA. And really, please do take the time to review and read the RFA in full. It's got a lot of information. So now I'm going to pass it back over to Libby, who's going to go over some of the review criteria.
Thanks, Alice. Now I'm going to go over what the proposals will be judged on. So on the slide, you can see the different point breakdown. I'm not going to read it out loud to you, but you can see how it's broken down. A review panel will be convened to evaluate proposals successfully submitted to grants.gov by the deadline. Incomplete or late proposals will not be considered. So as Alice said, just please be cautious with that and plan accordingly, and reach out early if you're having issues with grants.gov to the grants.gov help desk. The review criteria discussed in this webinar is based on the application content that is outlined in the RFA. For more information, please see the RFA on grants.gov. The review panel will evaluate each grant application based on how well it addresses each of the following evaluation criteria. So now we'll go one by one through these and provide a little more detail for you. Okay. So as we go through the review criteria over the next few slides, we want to also apply this criteria to a sample project to help you better understand what we'll be looking for as we analyze your proposals. Please do not copy this project verbatim for your state. However, innovative, well-researched, innovative, well-researched projects of this type are welcome. So please just don't copy it verbatim. The example project we will use for discussion purposes is a project creating a worker dashboard to better monitor applications. All right. Okay, the first review criteria that I'm going to talk about is the project design section. And this section is the most heavily weighted section of the evaluation criteria, as you can see on the first slide. So it contains an analysis of the problem and how the project you're proposing will help solve the problem. The proposal should include and clearly describe the problem to be solved and provide evidence that the proposed approach is well suited to solve the identified issue. So the RFA offers some specific criteria for the project design section, so you can look at the details there, but we're also going to go over an example using the example that I outlined So this is our kind of highlighting a bad example and good example for the program design. So in a not so great example, we might see it identifies that a worker dashboard is going to be creative, but just doesn't include the evidence that I mentioned of why that's going to solve the problem, why that's needed. Effort isn't made to show how it's going to be implemented, and maybe the letters of commitment are very short, template, don't really show how the project is making those connections. A good example would improve the application processing timeliness, would lay out how it's going to improve application processing timeliness for the project area. It would include measurable, attainable goals. It would be very clear how this problem is going to be solved by this specific project. And the full project timeline would be included, and then you'd have more detail in those letters of commitment. And now we were talking a little bit about the letters of commitment, so I'm going to make a little note about those that you might be required to submit with your proposal depending on your situation. So if a state agency submits an application in partnership with other organizations, the state must provide a letter of commitment from the proposed partner. State agencies submitting an application on their own do not need a letter of commitment. So if you're a state agency on your own, you do not need a letter of commitment. The letters can be addressed to the FNS grant officer, Kimberly Shields. On the other side, we have letters of endorsement. So FNS also welcomes grant proposals from entities other than a state agency. Applicants that are not a state agency, though, must demonstrate that the state agency strongly endorses or is involved in the proposed project through a letter of endorsement. It must also describe how the project will support the state's current or planned technology improvement efforts and priorities. So that kind of goes back to our bad and good examples, making sure that those letters are clear that this project has been well thought out and planned. Okay, the next section of the review criteria is organizational experience, staff capability, and management. The narrative provided in your proposal should provide enough detail for reviewers to easily understand who is managing this project and the time commitment it will involve. Proposals should also include a detailed internal and, if applicable, external communications plan. So I think the last slide went over this pretty well, but what we're looking for is a proposal that clearly states who's going to be involved and what team members will be doing, when they will meet, how often, what topics they will discuss, a simple kind of just not including any resumes, not including job descriptions, not including detailed plans of what's going to happen, probably will not receive as many points. You want the reviewer to be able to get a clear picture of what, of who in the agency will be doing what. All right, so this year, the next review criteria we'll look at is evaluation, and this one's a little more cut. We're going to have a few slides on this and kind of break this down because we have some new areas this year. In addition to prioritizing cost effectiveness and demonstrating that the anticipated results are commensurate with the cost of the project, FNS is looking for proposals that include a comprehensive evaluation plan. All proposals must include a comprehensive evaluation process that is specific, data-driven, and measures whether the problem identified is addressed by the proposed project intervention, and tracks activities and indicators using the activities tracker included in the RFA. And we're going to go over all of this. So this year, evaluation is going to fall into kind of two buckets. So as we get started, kind of think of that. I'm going to break this into two different pieces to try to hopefully make it a little bit more clear. So the new requirements for evaluation are to capture both process and outcome measures. So you can think of them in the two categories. The first is the activities tracker. So using the activities tracker, you should map your proposed activities and indicators of success to the objectives / priority areas. Those are interchangeable. So when we say we went over the priority areas at the beginning, but on the activities tracker, you can see on the slide, there's a little picture of it. It lists the term objectives. That is also your priority area. So you're not required to have, I did want to clarify, you're not required to have more than one objective, but however, for each objective, there must be at least one proposed activity and at least one proposed indicator. An indicator is any metric you anticipate will be able to be tracked during the period of performance. So you're going to start off with your objective, also known as priority area, and you're going to follow that up with a proposed activity and at least one indicator. If you end up choosing more than one priority area, you would do a second objective and do the same thing. And you can have more than one, if you just choose one priority area and objective, you might have more than one activity. You likely would have multiple activities and indicators that you're going to map out. And there is a format included in the RFA that we would like you to follow for this activities tracker. So I've broken down a little example here. If your objective is priority area 2, improve customer service, your proposed activity is to provide iPads to lobby staff, and your indicator is 16 iPads were purchased. Your indicator 2 is wireless connectivity added to 6 buildings. So you're just kind of a simple process example. Now we're going to move on to the second part of your evaluation plan. So we want you to have, as a part of your overall evaluation plan, both of these pieces, both your process and your outcome in your application so that we can see how you're going to measure these different parts. The overall success is the second piece. Those are your outcome measures. So please outline how the success will be measured at the completion of the project, how you will show the overall impact on SNAP or on whichever piece, the certification process that you were trying to impact. So you can see here, for example, in the example I used for the activities tracker, we were improving customer service by providing iPads to lobby staff. So when looking at the overall success in your application, you would be sharing how you were going to measure or potentially a reduction in lobby wait times or an increase in completed tasks in the lobby, figure out what those markers would be for you that you can measure accurately and report back to us to show the success of the project. Okay. And I just wanted to make a quick note that the activities tracker is required. So please use the format in the RFA. It's provided there for a reason. There's additional information for you in the RFA if you need it. That's in appendix. There's additional information, actually. I missed one piece that I just wanted to highlight for you all. In appendix B of the RFA, there's a sample of the reporting form and what it will look like, and how these activities and indicators will be used in that reporting form. Don't worry too much about the reporting form itself. That's just provided to you for context. We're going to talk about that a little later at the end of the presentation, but it does provide a little context for the activities tracker. Okay. We do have one more example, and this is an example kind of highlighting the overall success of the program and how you would really demonstrate that. In a bad example, your evaluation plan would be really short. It, would just kind of say that the dashboard was created. This is going back to our original example, and that the caseworkers will be surveyed. So it's not really showing the impact of the project on SNAP. And a good example would be detailed. It would provide pre and post dashboard launch surveys, measure targets for triaging applications. For expedite, it would include in-house or contracted out evaluation consultant for more rigorous analysis. So the more rigorous your analysis can be, the better. Okay, I'm going to move on to budget appropriateness and economic efficiency. This is the second most heavily weighted item that we will be scoring. Proposal submissions which omit the required budget forms, budget narrative, and/or line item descriptions will not receive the full point value for this criterion. Therefore, applicants should recognize that a well-written budget narrative which justifies the proposed project expenditures assists reviewers during the review process. The RFA outlines additional requirements if proposals include indirect costs, projects that include programs other than SNAP, larger budgets, and nonprofit applicants or partners. Information about these items, should the proposal include them, should be within your budget section as well. So make sure you're making all of those connections and telling the story of your project so that it's very clear to a reviewer. Oops. Sorry guys, hold on one second, let's go back. Okay, and we did want to make a quick note about contractual costs. Applicants that are required to issue bids should provide a narrative explaining the requirement and provide a reasonable estimate of contractual and consultant costs. This slide lists what specific information should be included in your proposal, and that's also in the RFA. I'm going to move on to an example. So similar to above, I mean, when we're thinking about an example that wouldn't receive a lot of points, you know, it's not very descriptive, you know, it's just simple, it doesn't provide all the information that you need. And if we're looking at a good example, it's going to have all the correct forms. The narrative is going to address different portions of the line item budget, make all of those connections for the reviewers so they understand. And the line item budget is clear. So, all right, some things to consider. We've included a budget checklist in the RFA to help applicants demonstrate to the review panel that they have put effort into determining what they will need to spend and for what purpose. It seems simple, but sometimes budgets clearly lack simple items that are mentioned elsewhere in the proposal, which can hurt your score for your proposal. So please be sure to take the time and make sure that all components are in alignment and that anything that you've mentioned is clearly followed through in the budget line item so we understand how it's going to be paid for. The last review criteria is presentation. Presentation seems easy, and it is as long as you take the time to double check before submission. Project description should be no more than 25 pages. This does not include cover sheet, table of contents, required forms, or other appendices. All pages, excluding the form pages, must be numbered. And this is just a reminder, you know, we talked about it earlier, but so we're going over the points that there is the up to 3 points available beyond a possible 100 for data-driven proposals. All right, Alice is going to talk to us a little bit more about application submission.
Great, thanks, Libby. So now we're going to give you a little bit more info on how to submit your application and some additional information. And I also just wanted to give a shout out if anyone has any questions that are coming up as we're going through all this. I know it's a lot. You can feel free to type those into the chat or the Q&A box now, and we will address them at the end, or you're welcome to save them for the end, but you're welcome to type them in advance if you'd like. So, as was mentioned earlier, this year we do have some new reporting requirements that are going to be required for winning grantees. A sample form of this new reporting is available in Appendix B of the RFA, and there's a little screenshot of it there on your screen. We will provide training on this form to grantees after the grants are awarded, but we're just giving this form to you as a reference to use as you develop your activities tracker. So if you do look at that sample form in the RFA, you'll see that the activities tracker items directly map into this reporting form. So it's really, it's going to be used FNS-wide soon, and it's going to be a great way for us to kind of quantify our grant results. So just a heads up there. There are also some required forms that we have every year, and these are the standard forms in the 424 family, and they are available on grants.gov under the tab entitled Forms. If your organization is not a state agency, please be aware that you're also required to submit an AD 3030 with your application package. So the Grant Program Accounting System and Financial Capability Questionnaire. This can be found on pages 25 to 26 of the RFA and is required for all applicants to complete. And I apologize, it looks like the page numbers are a little off on the slide, but you'll find it in the RFA. And then also, please be aware, in order to submit an application via grants.gov, applicants must have a DUNS number, so that's a Data Universal Numbering System number, and as well as be registered in SAM, in the Systems for Award Management, and on grants.gov. So it's a lot of different things that you have to go through in advance of applying. Obtaining a DUNS number could take several days. In order to register in SAM, you need your DUNS number, your tax ID number, and your taxpayer name. So that's the kind of order of operations. Is do DUNS first and then do SAM after that. For new SAM registrants and those updating or renewing their registration in SAM, in order to deter and prevent fraudulent activity, you're now required to mail in a notarized letter identifying that you are the authorized entity administrator for the entity associated with that DUNS number. This letter must be received by SAM before the registration will be activated in the system. We anticipate that this might cause a delay in the application process, so please do this early. If you're new to SAM, definitely get that registration process started now rather than later. You don't have to know what your final proposal is going to look like to get some of these numbers started, so we really do recommend starting them now. For more information on the SAM letter, visit www.sam.gov and the new requirements at the top of their page. Once you're registered in SAM, verification takes at least 48 hours after that registration is submitted, and applicants must have a valid SAM registration no later than 3 days prior to the application due date. So again, this stuff all kind of don't get caught at the end and missing all those deadlines. So, start early on your DUNS and SAM registrations. And then lastly, the registration process for grants.gov can take between 3 to 5 business days. So another thing to register for. We apologize. These things are out of our hands, unfortunately, but if you get them started now, it should be no problem. And if you have accounts with them from previous applications, you should be able to use those. So registering with these systems can be a complicated process. You do not need to have a final proposal in order to register in SAM or obtain a DUNS number, as I mentioned. And just as an FYI, all applicants must follow grants.gov guidance on file naming conventions. You'll see some of them listed here on the slide. To avoid submission issues, please follow the guidance provided in the grants.gov frequently asked questions page. So now we want to show you quickly how to get to the PTIGs on the FNS website. So before we take questions, I just want to show you how to do this. So you go to the FNS homepage, which is fns.usda.gov, which Libby just typed into the chat box, so you can see that there. And then you select the Grants tab at the top of the page. Once you select that Grants tab, you'll see a drop-down, which the word Grants appears underneath. And you'll want to click that Grants drop-down. We have a brand new website, so we're still getting used to it ourselves, but you'll click that second Grants. And then the Grants tab will take you to a list of open grants at FNS. You'll want to select the FY19 SNAP Process and Technology Improvement Grants link that was posted on April 11th, 2019. Which is probably located near the top of that page still, and that will take you to the PTIG landing page, which you can see on this slide.
And this is the one that I referenced at the beginning when I talked about how you could find where previous what previous grantees have done. So if you scroll, this is a screenshot, so I can't scroll, but if you scroll to the bottom, you'll find a list, and you can see the previous grantees. So I just wanted to flag that.
And the PT landing page, in addition to showing those previous recipients, also includes all the links to apply for a grant. It includes links to some of those required forms, as well as this webinar recording will be located there. There's also the registration for our webinar next week. Both webinars are identical, by the way. And so everything you need should be there. And then we just have a couple of quick reference links for you all. So this slide includes reference information that might be helpful. And we will be emailing these slides out after the webinar, but it just, again, includes the links to the PTIG site. It includes contact information for Kimberly Shields, who is our grant officer, as well as where to find the actual RFA and where to submit your application by June 10th. So that brings us to the end. If you have questions, please send them to us using the chat feature in WebEx. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have, and if we are unable to answer them, we will certainly get an answer for you. So we'll just take a minute now, and please feel free to type in any questions into that chat feature or into the Q&A feature. Hey there, so we've got one question so far, and so the question is about that evaluation component. And the question is may the PTIG funds be used to pay researchers to conduct the outcome evaluation? Absolutely. You can build that into your plan. You'll just need to include, as we mentioned earlier about using contractors, it's actually quite common that these grants will cover a portion of contractor costs. And so just you have to make sure that you've got a proper quote from them, and you'll need to include information on who from that research firm is going to conduct what. There's a lot of more information on how to fill that out in the budget checklist and in the RFA, but if you have specific questions on that, feel free to shoot them to us later. But yes, we are definitely fine with an outside company being contracted to conduct the evaluation. Again, please feel free to type in any questions that you've got into that chat box or the Q&A. I know we had a couple of new things in the process this year. There's that new activities tracker. If you have any questions about how to fill that out, let us know if you need us to expound more on that. We've got the new priority areas this year.
Eligibility.
Yeah, some new eligibility criteria. So we'll give it just another minute or two for folks to type in. So I see one other question here is somebody wants to know where to find the activities tracker or also the attachments. So if you go into the RFA, and we'll email out the slides, and there was a screenshot in there as well. But in the RFA on page 11, you'll see a page written about the activities tracker. So it kind of describes what we need there. It gives you that templated box that shows you where to type in the objective, which is the priority area. It gives you, proposed activity 1, and then you could type in some indicators. So I think the earlier example that Libby provided was the proposed activity was, I think, adding iPads into the lobby, and so the indicator might have been like the purchase of those iPads and then some other quantifiable number like that. You can have multiple activities and indicators per priority area. It's up to you, but we will need at least one of those from you in order to go through with everything. So one other question that we just got is, can you explain a bit more about what qualifies as a new project? So a new project would be one that you are not currently working on right now. But what I mean by that is for example, using that example from earlier where they were building a worker dashboard, if you are halfway done building that dashboard, we can't fund the second half of it. But if you're doing a lot of preparatory work for the grant, whether that's research to develop or show the need for this particular grant, and that will also, that flows into our bonus point potential if you're doing, you know, a lot of background work to, whether it's to assess the need in your state or your agency for this kind of intervention, or you're doing research to determine what the intervention options are. Those kind of things are all acceptable as leading up to the grant, and they wouldn't be considered the grant ongoing itself. But if you figured out what that intervention was and then you were 6 months into it and you were like, oh, this grant opportunity came up, we can get someone to pay for this thing that we've already started implementing, then that would not be a new project. So we'll pay for new projects but not ongoing regular operations, if that makes sense. And I'm happy to clarify that more if folks have a question. So I see a question here that says we have a good start on working on our eligibility workflow. Can we continue that work under the PTIG? It depends on what exactly you're referencing. So if you recently underwent like business process reengineering, if you did BPR last year and you came up with a plan of attack on how you're going to change your eligibility workflow, and you have not yet actually undertaken all of the efforts in that research, that would be fine to apply for a PTIG under. But if you, it depends, because if you can chunk it off, then it would potentially be acceptable. And I'm the person that asked that. We're happy to chat with you by email, just with like a tiny bit more information. But generally speaking, if it's something that is like ongoing regular processes, it's not qualifying. But if you are able to say, oh, you know, we have this like 4-module project that we're working on and this one module hasn't started yet, that would potentially be acceptable. We have another question that just came in about IVR, about that interactive voice recognition, and they wanted to know if they're updating an existing IVR, would that be considered a new project? And yeah, if you're going to replace your current IVR, that can be considered a new project as long as you can, you know, identify that need and explain why it's necessary. And then we've got a question on the funding levels. So they want to confirm that the grant amounts reflect the funding ceiling and floor per each year of the project. So we said that usually grants are between $20,000 and $2 million. That's for the duration of the project. That's for all 3 years combined. We only have $5 million to hand out at once this year, and we do between 6 and 11 grants. So you kind of do the math. We do a little on the low end, a little on the high end. We kind of score based on how things map out. But it would be, you know, between that $20,000 and $2 million for the whole 3 years. But also, just to clarify, that funding doesn't have to be used over a 3-year period. You can use up to 3 years on the grants. You can apply for a project that only lasts 1 year and use your whole budget in 1 year. You could apply for a project that lasts the whole 3 years and not, you know, incrementally spend against that over those 3 years. It just depends on your needs.
You apply for a certain amount of funding, and then it's available to you at the beginning of the first year, and then you can use it as you choose over the next 3 years. Hope that helps.
And we've got another question about the new projects situation. And this, just to throw out there, this is not a new requirement. We have always had this requirement in there, but that, basically when we say new projects, we don't want to pay for, we're unable to pay for ongoing regular business processes. We're not going to pay for something that you know, if you're doing a 2-year-long project that you've already halfway started, we are unable to pay for that. But if you've gone through the planning phase, but you have not yet implemented, that would be acceptable as long as you aren't implementing until the grant period starts, which is September 30th.
Good. Are there any other questions, or please make a note if we missed something? Oh, here we go. Sorry, there's some coming through on different chat versus Q&A, so we'll make sure we get everyone.
So one of the questions is, can you have 2 unrelated activities for one objective? So, for example, objective 2, improvement to call center, and improvement of technology for QC staff. Sure, you can absolutely. If your activities, they should fit into a cohesive project. But if you have 2 activities, as long as if they fit under one priority area and they aren't.
Yeah, just to clarify, the priority area would be the objective. So it might be improve customer service, because that's the priority area. And then under that would be your activity would be improvement to the call center or improvement. So it's broken down a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you'll have, like, at the top level, your objective / priority area. They are the same thing.
And that should always be the priority area.
It'll be improve customer service. You can choose one objective / priority area, or you can do more than one. You're not required to do more than one, but you have the option. But then within that, you can pick at least one activity or multiple. Those activities don't have to be related to each other, but they should obviously relate somehow within the project.
So the activity might not be specifically improvement to the call center. The activity might be a little bit more specific about what you're going to do to improve the call center, just for that specific purpose, for that tracker. That's why we were trying to go through it. I do know it's new. If you have specific questions, you can reach out by email.
And we can send out, I think, with a follow-up email, we can send out an example of that filled in. With the example from today, we can shout out that slide that we did. And
because when I see the improvement to call center, that might be actually more related to what your overall success will be, is like showing that improvement to the call center rather than the activity. I hope that helps a little bit.
And then we've got another question here on splitting out funds in the budget for costs associated with other programs, such as SNAP notices versus TANF notices. So for that, we're gonna, you'll need to spell out in your proposal, generally, and I'm gonna look through quickly in these notes, but you're gonna need, so let's say that of all of your, I'm assuming you're talking about like combined notices, or that you're gonna do a notice project potentially related to all of the programs. So either if you're doing, if you send out single program notices and 30% of them are SNAP notices and 70% are TANF, then you'll need to calculate out the total cost of the project, but we would only be able to pay for that 30%, unless you're only going to overhaul SNAP notices, in which case we would do 100. But if you're going to do it combined with other programs, Medicaid, what have you, we totally welcome that. We love all making sure everything is really accessible for our customers, but we just, you'll need to calculate out what percentage of that project is related to SNAP. And yeah, we often get combo projects like that as well, proposals. So if anyone has any follow-up questions, we'll give it another minute or two. Hi there. So we just got another question about the webinar. They want to know if there'll be a written Q&A transcript available with the other materials. At this time, we are not planning to transcribe this Q&A, but the recording will be available on our website for rewatch. So we've got another question here. Can the project be specific to a county, or does it have to be adaptable to all counties? It can be specific to whatever county you may be applying with. And just to reiterate, a state agency can apply for the whole state, or one county or a group of counties could apply together. We're pretty open on that front, but if you're talking about doing an application just to support your one county, that's perfectly fine. If it has implications where down the line it could be rolled out to other counties in the future, I would definitely mention that in your application that it has that ability, but it does not have to be adaptable by all counties.
Okay, it looks like I don't see any other questions. If you put a question and we somehow missed it, why don't you type a wait into the thing quickly so that we can see it and then pause, or you can follow up by email if we missed it for some reason, and I apologize if so. I think hopefully we covered all of them. As we've mentioned, we will make sure this recording and PowerPoint are up on the site as soon as possible. As Alice mentioned, our new website, FNS website, just launched a few days ago. So it may take us a couple days to get it through because they're a little bit crunched. So we will get it up as soon as possible for you, and we'll follow up with an email. Oh, I'm seeing a question come through.
So it's the questions about the RFA and about the required forms that need to be submitted. They want to know if all of the forms listed on checklist page Roman numeral 4 are required, or if a comprehensive list can be found on grants.gov. You can look in both of those places. I would certainly start with our checklist. Those are all the main forms, but you can also, as you'll see, even on our checklist, most of those forms link to grants.gov. So you should be able to find a list there as well, but we have our forms there, and there are one or two forms in our list that won't be fillable PDFs on grants.gov. So there's that grant program accounting system questionnaire that's in Appendix A of the RFA. That's not on grants.gov as its own form. And then there's also, if you're planning to request indirect costs, we'll need a form filled out about that as well. And then there's also it depends on your situation. There's also that 80-30-30 that I mentioned that you might need to fill out if you're not the state applying. If you're a nonprofit organization, we require your 501c3 letter. So there's various letters and forms that are required depending on your situation. So I'd start with our checklist and work from there.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time, and we wish you luck.
Yes, and if there's anyone in your agency that wants to hear this webinar, we are recording it, but we're also hosting it again next Tuesday.
Yes, and it is the same information. You do not need to attend to both. I mean, you are welcome to if you would like to, but you do not. You will likely not hear new information.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.